The wedding was supposed to fix things between us. Not my wedding, my cousin Ria's. The whole family converging on that rented property outside Darjeeling. 3 days in early March when the clouds sat so low you could feel them on your teeth. 26 of us in a house meant for 12, and somehow that was the point. My mother said it would be like the old days. She said it with a look that meant, you will come and you will not bring your excuses. I hadn't seen most of them in 4 years. Not since my father's funeral, which I'd attended for 11 hours total, the flight in, the ceremony, the cremation, the flight back. My mother had stopped calling it avoidance. She'd started calling it something worse. Your nature. As if I'd been assembled with a defect she'd finally accepted. So I went, not to fix anything, but because refusing would have required a conversation I didn't have the energy for. I took 3 days off from the logistics company where I'd been doing overnight dispatch for 14 months. I packed a bag that was too small because I unconsciously wanted to remind myself I wouldn't be staying long. And I took the toy train from New Jalpaiguri with my cousin Sorav, who'd picked me up in a Scorpio that smelled like clove cigarettes and old upholstery. The property was called something, Mountain View or Hill Crest, or one of those English names that old hill station rentals keep because the signage was painted in 1974 and no one's repainted since. It sat at the end of a gravel road that turned off the main road about 8 kilometers past the town center. Behind it, the land dropped steeply into a valley, choked with pine and sal and rhododendron. In front, a long, unpaved clearing served as parking. To the left, the hillside climbed. To the right, a line of trees, mostly pine, some I couldn't identify, formed a wall about 40 meters from the house. The tree line ran roughly north-south, and beyond it, the slope dropped again into a secondary valley that, as far as I could tell, nobody used for anything. I arrived on a Thursday afternoon. The wedding was Saturday. The house was already full. I could hear it from the car, not specific voices, just the collective hum that families make when they're together in insufficient space. Laughter layered over arguments, layered over the clatter of steel plates, and the particular whistle of a pressure cooker that someone had brought from home because they didn't trust the rental's kitchen. Ria met me at the door. She looked the way brides look 3 days before. Not happy, exactly, but accelerated. She hugged me and said something about my weight. And then she was gone, pulled back into the current. Sorav carried my bag in. My mother was in the kitchen. She looked at me for 1 second too long, then handed me tea without speaking, and that was the greeting. That was the repair. I'll describe the house because it matters. 2 stories, concrete with a wood-paneled upper floor, 6 bedrooms, most of which had been converted to sleeping halls with mattresses on the floor, a long common room with windows facing the valley, a kitchen that was too small for the number of women occupying it, 2 bathrooms per floor, a wide wooden porch that wrapped around 2 sides and gave you a view of the tree line to the right and the open clearing in front. The tree line, I keep coming back to it. There was no fence between the house and those trees, no boundary marker, just the gravel clearing thinning into scrubby grass, then a band of low bushes. Then the trunks began, dense, not impenetrable. You could see maybe 10 meters in during the day when the light was right. But it had a quality I noticed the first evening, standing on the porch with my uncle Probeer while he smoked. The trees seemed to begin at a particular line, as if they'd agreed on it. Not a natural tree line like you see where forest gives way to altitude or soil change. More like a decision. The grass simply stopped being grass, and the trees simply started being trees at a line that could have been drawn with a ruler. I mentioned this to Probeer. He shrugged. Probably was farmland once, he said. They stopped farming. The trees came back. They come back in a line when the field had a border. That made sense. I let it go. That first night, 26 people in a house meant for 12 generates a particular sound environment. You're never in silence. Someone is always awake, a child crying, a couple murmuring, the older aunts who sleep in 2-hour shifts because their knees hurt. I was on the upper floor in what had been designated the boys' room. Myself, Surav, 2 younger cousins I barely knew named Arnab and Piku, and Ria's fiancé Tarun's brother, whose name I learned was Jeet. We slept on thin mattresses with our feet toward the center. The window was on the tree-line side. I woke at 2:40 a.m. I know the time because I checked my phone immediately. Dispatch habit. I'd been having a dream about the logistics system, about containers stacking in the wrong order. And I surfaced from it with that disoriented certainty that something external had pulled me up. Everyone else in the room was breathing the deep rhythm of sleep. Through the window, the tree line was a single dark mass, no moon. Clouds too low, I listened. The house creaked. Someone downstairs turned over. I heard the mattress shift. A dog barked far away, down in the valley, 3 sharp notes and then silence. Then I heard my mother's voice. It came from outside, from the direction of the tree line. It said my name, my Dake name, the one only family uses. Just once, clearly. In her exact intonation, that particular way she says it when she's calling me for food or telling me to come look at something. Not shouting. Conversational volume, which meant it wasn't far, maybe at the edge of the grass. I sat up. My body had already decided this was wrong before my mind caught up. My mother was downstairs. I'd seen her go into the ground floor room with my moshi and my grandmother. At 10:30, she was 61 years old, and her knees were worse than the aunt's. She was not standing outside in the dark at 2:40 a.m., calling my name in a conversational tone. I stayed still. I watched the window. Nothing moved in the frame of it, just the static dark mass of the tree line against a marginally lighter sky. I waited for maybe 5 minutes. Nothing repeated. I told myself I'd dreamed it. The tail end of sleep, a fragment of dream that felt external. This is common. This is documented. I'd read about it, hypnopompic hallucination. I lay back down, but I didn't sleep. In the morning, I said nothing about it. The house was chaos. The wedding preparations had entered their kinetic phase. Flowers arriving, arguments about the menu, Someone's blouse didn't fit. The priest called about timing. I drank tea on the porch and watched the tree line in daylight, and it was just trees. Dense, yes. Oddly uniform in where they began, yes. But just trees, birds moving in them. The ordinary commerce of a forest edge. In the morning, I helped carry tables. I drove with Soarav to pick up ice. I avoided meaningful conversations with my mother by staying in motion. The day was normal. The day was the aggressive normalcy that families generate when enough people are in proximity. There is no space for strangeness because every cubic meter is occupied by logistics. That evening, the mehendi. Ria's hands being painted while the women sang, those particular wedding songs that I'd heard my whole life without learning the words. The men sat on the porch and drank Royal Stag from plastic cups and talked about cricket and politics and real estate. I sat with them, but at the edge, as I always sit at the edge. Soarav brought me a drink. We talked about nothing. The sun went down. The tree line became a wall again. At 9:15, it happened in front of Soarav. We were on the porch. Most of the others had gone inside. It was cold, the mountain cold that arrives suddenly once the sun is fully gone. Soarav and I were finishing cigarettes, the house noise behind us, the dark clearing in front, the trees to our right. Sorav's mother, my Mashi, called his name. From the trees, not from the house, from the tree line or just beyond it. His full name, first and last, in her exact voice, the way she says it when she's annoyed, loud enough to be clear, close enough to be conversational. Soarav stopped mid-drag. He turned toward the trees. I watched his face. He'd heard it. That wasn't ambiguity or suggestion. He'd heard it exactly as I'd heard my mother's voice the night before. His face did something complicated, confusion. Then the beginning of a smile like it might be a joke. Then the smile dying as the processing caught up. Was that, he said? Yes, I said. She's inside. She's been inside for an hour. I know. We both looked at the tree line. Nothing moved, nothing followed. No second call. Just the one clear utterance, and then the forest was silent again, and behind us the house continued its noise as if nothing had happened. Soarav put out his cigarette. He didn't look at me. Acoustics, he said. These valleys. Sound bounces. He said this the way you say something when you know it's wrong, but you need it to be right. Because his mother's voice had not come from behind us, from the house. It had come from the right, from the trees, from the direction where no persons had reason to be at 9:15 at night in the cold. I told him about the night before. My mother's voice, the same direction. He listened. He nodded. He said, "Some bird, probably. There are birds that mimic." I said yes. He said it with even less conviction than the acoustics theory. We went inside. I found my mother in the common room, sitting with my grandmother, watching something on someone's phone. She looked up when I came in and said, "Eat, you haven't eaten." She had not been outside. She had not called my name. She was in her nightgown with a sweater over it, her feet tucked under her on the couch. She had been there for hours. 3 other people confirmed this without me having to ask. Because when I sat down, my Mashi said, "Your mother hasn't moved since 7. She's tired. Don't make her get up." I ate. I went to bed. I did not sleep until after 4. At 3:20, it happened again. This time, it was not my mother's voice. It was Ria's. And it wasn't saying a name. It was laughing. That particular high laugh she does when something delights her. I've known it since we were children, coming from beyond the tree line, not at the edge this time, deeper, like the source had moved 10, 15 meters into the trees. The same conversational volume, which meant it was closer than it should have been, because sound at that volume shouldn't carry clearly from within dense forest. I was already awake, so I heard it immediately. I lay there and listened, and it came again, the same laugh, exactly repeated. Exactly, not approximately. The same breath pattern, the same pitch rise, the same duration. As if someone had recorded it and played it twice. Ria was downstairs. Ria was asleep. I knew this. Everyone was asleep except me and, apparently, someone else. Because I heard Arnab shift on his mattress and mutter something. I looked at him. His eyes were open. He was looking at the window. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, "Go to sleep, Dada." He rolled over. I watched the back of his head and understood that he had heard it and was choosing the same thing Saurav had chosen, the same thing I'd chosen the night before. The rational explanation, the not thinking about it, the going back to sleep. I didn't sleep. I watched the window until the sky lightened and the tree line resolved back into individual trunks and branches, and the morning birds began. And at no point during those hours did the voice or the laugh come again. The night had a window. The window closed at dawn, Friday, the day before the wedding. The house was even more chaotic. More people arrived. Tarun's family, another 8 bodies making the house genuinely sardine-dense. I was helping set up chairs in the clearing when I walked close to the tree line for the first time. I didn't intend to investigate. I was carrying chairs from a stack near the side of the house to the clearing where the ceremony would happen. My path took me within 10 meters of the trees. I glanced in. The forest floor was carpeted with pine needles. Brown, dry, undisturbed, no footprints, no animal tracks that I could see. The trunks went back into shadow even in midday. The canopy was thick enough to create perpetual dusk inside. I stood there holding a plastic chair and looking into the trees and feeling nothing. No dread, no pull, no atmospheric wrongness, just forest. Ordinary, quiet, dense forest that happened to start at a very straight line. I put the chair down and walked to where the grass ended. I looked at the ground. The border was exact. Grass then, a half-meter of bare earth, then pine needles, then trunks. I crouched. The bare earth band was hard-packed, slightly darker than the soil on either side. It ran in both directions as far as I could see, north and south, a strip of bare ground separating the human space from the trees like a margin on a page. I nearly stepped over it. My foot was moving, and then Saurav called my name from behind me, legitimately from the clearing, where he was waving me over to help with the sound system. I went. That afternoon, I found the caretaker. He wasn't technically a caretaker. He was the owner's son, a man in his 50s named Dawa, who lived in a smaller house further up the gravel road. He'd come down to check the water pump. I was on the porch, doing nothing, avoiding the interior chaos. When he came around the side of the house with a wrench, I asked him about the trees. He looked at me with the particular expression that locals in tourist areas have. The one that means they're calculating whether answering honestly will create a problem they'll have to manage. He said, "What about them?" I said, "They start very suddenly." He nodded. "Old boundary, tea estate, long time ago." This matched Probier's theory. Former agricultural land, clear border, forest reclaiming it. I asked, "Do animals come close at night? Do you hear anything from in there after dark?" His expression changed. Not dramatically, a small contraction. He looked toward the tree line and then back at me and said, "Don't go in there at night." He said it simply, not dramatically, not with the weight of warning. More like telling me not to drink the tap water. Practical advice delivered practically. I asked why. He said, "It's forest, wild animals, leopards sometimes." Then he went to check the pump. I watched him walk away and noticed that his path took him on a wide arc that kept him at maximum distance from the tree line, even though close would have halved his walking distance. Friday night, the Sanjeet. Music and dancing in the common room, which had been cleared of furniture. Someone had a speaker playing Bengali songs and Hindi film songs alternately. The younger cousins danced. The older ones watched and clapped. My mother sat with her sisters and looked happy. Genuinely happy, not performed happy. And I felt something unlock in my chest watching her. This was why she'd wanted me to come. Not for repair, just for proximity. Just to be in the same room while happiness happened. I was in the common room when it happened at 10:40. The music was loud. The room was full. I was standing near the back wall, leaning, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold. And through the music, through the laughter, through the clapping, and the stomping of feet on the wooden floor, I heard my own voice, from outside, from the tree line, saying words I couldn't quite make out. My voice, my specific voice, in what sounded like a full sentence spoken at normal volume. I shouldn't have been able to hear it through the noise, but I heard it the way you hear your name in a crowd. Cut from a different frequency, arriving on a different channel. I put my tea down. I walked to the porch. The cold hit me. The clearing was dark. The tree line was dark. The only light was what spilled from the house windows, cutting yellow rectangles into the gravel. I stood on the porch and listened. The noise from inside was muffled now by the wall. Outside, silence. When the pines, that particular sound, like sustained static, nothing else. Then Ria's voice from the trees. "Hey, come here, come look at this." Then Sorav's voice answering her from deeper in, "What? Where?" Then my mother's voice, something I couldn't catch, a half sentence, the tone of casual conversation, then silence. I stood there for what felt like minutes. My hands were shaking, and it wasn't from the cold, because what I'd just heard was not a single voice mimicking. It was multiple voices in sequence, interacting. A conversation, as if there were people in those trees having a normal exchange. Except the people whose voices they were were all inside the house behind me, dancing, clapping, alive and present and accounted for. Sorov came out. "There you are. Come inside. It's cold." He saw my face. He looked toward the tree line. He didn't ask what I'd heard. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Come inside." Again, and this time it was not a casual suggestion. I went inside. I did not go back out. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't try. I lay on my mattress with my eyes open and listened. Arnab and Piku were breathing. Jeet was snoring lightly. Sorov, next to me, was awake. I could tell by his breathing, by the occasional shift of his body that was too deliberate for sleep. At 1:55 it began, not one voice, not two, a group. 4, 5, maybe more, all speaking simultaneously in the low murmur of overlapping conversation, coming from the tree line, coming from different positions within it, some closer, some deeper, all familiar, all family. I could pick out my mother's cadence, Sorov's mother's higher register, my uncle Prober's deep bass note, Ria's laugh threading through, and my own voice. I heard my own voice among them, saying things I couldn't parse, participating in a conversation I wasn't part of. Surov sat up. He was looking at the window. In the dark room I couldn't see his expression, but I could hear his breathing, which had gone shallow and fast. "You hear it," I said. "I hear it." We sat there, the murmur continued. It was not getting louder. It was not approaching. It stayed at the tree line, at that exact border, as if the margin of bare earth was a wall it spoke through, but didn't cross. The conversation, if that's what it was, went on for maybe 15 minutes. Natural pauses, rises and falls in volume. Someone laughing, my voice laughing, at a joke I hadn't heard. The sound of a family gathered together in comfortable proximity, talking the way families talk when the day is over and the pressure of performance has lifted and everyone is just together. It was the most ordinary sound in the world, and it was coming from pitch black forest at 2 in the morning. At 2:12 it stopped, not faded, stopped mid-sentence, mid-breath, as if someone had pressed pause. The silence after it was absolute. No wind, no insects, no distant dogs. Just the house settling, and Sorov's breathing and my own pulse. Neither of us spoke. Eventually I heard Sorov lie back down. Eventually his breathing evened out, and I think he slept. I didn't. I lay there until dawn, Saturday, the wedding day. I thought about leaving. I calculated it. If I left before the ceremony, I could take a shared jeep back to that station and get the afternoon train. I'd be in Kolkata by midnight, away from here, away from the tree line, and whatever stood behind it, wearing our voices. But I looked at my mother at breakfast. She was helping Ria with her jewelry, her reading glasses on, concentrating with that focused love she gives to small, precise tasks. And I knew that if I left before the wedding, I would be confirming everything she'd learned to expect from me. I would be once again the one who leaves. So I stayed, and the day was beautiful. I mean that. The ceremony happened in the clearing, under a mandap decorated with marigolds, with the mountains visible through gaps in the cloud. Ria looked transcendent. Tarun looked terrified in the good way. The priest chanted and the fire burned, and the families merged in the way that families do at weddings, formally, ritually, irreversibly. My mother cried. I stood in the second row and watched and felt something unguarded. And when Ria looked at me during the Ferris and smiled, I smiled back and meant it. I did not look at the tree line. Not once during the ceremony. I kept my eyes on the people. I kept my attention inside the circle of warmth and noise and color. The trees were there in my peripheral vision. A dark wall to the right, but I refused them my focus. The reception went into the evening. Food, music, speeches, children running. Tarun's family danced to songs I didn't know. My mother sat next to me at dinner and didn't say anything important, but her shoulder touched mine and she didn't move away. And I didn't move away. And this was its own language. By 10 p.m., the energy was winding down, children asleep in corners, the older generation drifting toward bed. The young cousins still up, Sorav and Jeet and Arnab, passing a bottle between them on the porch. I was with them, drinking moderately, feeling the specific pleasant exhaustion of a day that had demanded my presence and received it. At 10:30, Arnab said, "Does anyone hear that?" We all went quiet. From the tree line, the murmur, louder than the previous nights. Not shouting, but the volume of a group of people talking in a room at a party, the conversational buzz of a gathering, multiple voices, all of them ours. Piku put his glass down. "What the fuck?" he said, very quietly. I realized that this was the first time it had happened while most of us were awake and together. The previous incidents had been solitary or paired. Now there were 5 of us on the porch, and the sound was undeniable, and the reactions on faces were legible even in the porch light's weak yellow reach. "Animals," Jeet said. "Some kind of bird, mine a bird's mimic." "That's not a bird," Sorav said. "That's my mother's voice. I can hear her saying my name. I could hear it too. Mashi's voice within the murmur, saying Sorav's name in that specific pattern. The 3 syllables drawn out the way she does when she's calling him from another room, and threading through it. Ria's laugh, Probir's bass note. My mother saying something in the register she uses for gossip, low, conspiratorial, delighted. My own voice again participating. The murmur from the trees was a perfect reproduction of what the house sounded like from outside. A family gathered, a celebration ongoing, as if the forest had recorded us during the day and was now playing us back to ourselves. But not quite, because the specific phrases when I could catch them were not things I'd heard anyone say today. They were new, they were generated. "I'm going to look," Arnab said, and he stood. "Don't," I said. The word left me before I chose it. Arnab looked at me. He was 22. He had the face of someone who doesn't believe in anything, yet because nothing has ever happened to him that requires belief. "It's probably someone in the village messing with us," he said. "Wedding house full of city people. They're having fun." "Don't!" I said again. Sorav stood up and put himself between Arnab and the porch steps. He didn't say anything. He just stood there. Arnab looked at him, looked at me, and I could see him deciding. The moment stretched. The murmur from the trees continued. Easy, comfortable, familial. Then a new voice joined it, Arnab's voice, coming from the trees, saying, "I'm going to look." The exact words he'd said 5 seconds ago, the exact intonation, played back from 40 meters away from the dark. Arnab sat back down. He didn't say anything else. He picked up his glass and drank, and his hand was steady, but his face had gone gray-yellow in the porch light. Piku put a hand on his shoulder. We went inside. All of us. We closed the doors. We closed the windows. The murmur continued outside. And because we were now inside, we could hear it even more clearly, floating in through the walls, through the gaps in the window frames, through the thin mountain air. Our voices outside, continuing the conversation we just abandoned. I found Dawa's number on a card, pinned to the kitchen wall, and called him. He answered on the second ring, despite it being nearly 11 at night. I told him what we were hearing. There was silence on the line. Then he said, "Keep everyone inside. Don't answer it. Don't go to the window. It stops by 4. He hung up. I went back to the common room. Sorav was there, and Jeet, and now Probir, who'd come down in his undershirt, looking irritated and confused. "What's that noise outside?" he said. "Sounds like people talking." "Don't go out," I said. Probir looked at me as if I'd said something strange. "I wasn't going to go out. It's freezing. I want to know who's out there." "No one," I said. "No one is out there." He heard it. Then he heard his own voice within the murmur, from outside, from beyond the tree line. I watched his face do what Sorav's face had done, what Arnab's face had done, what mine must have done that first night. The confusion, the beginning of rationality. And then the rationality failing because the evidence was too specific, too personal, too clearly real. Probir sat down. He didn't ask more questions. He sat in the common room and stared at the wall. And eventually, my Mashi came down and sat with him, and they didn't speak. The murmur continued. At midnight, more people were awake. The sound had penetrated the house thoroughly now, not louder, but more present, as if it had found the frequencies that walls couldn't block. My grandmother was awake, sitting in bed with her eyes open, her lips moving in what I recognized as prayer. 2 of the children were crying. Not frightened crying, but the confused whimpering of kids who've been woken by something they can't identify. Ria came down the stairs with Tarun. Her wedding night. She should have been upstairs, is in privacy, in the sanctioned intimacy of her first night as a married woman. Instead, she was in the common room in a t-shirt and leggings, looking at me with an expression that combined fear and anger in equal measure. "What is that?" she said. Not a question, a demand. "I don't know. It's saying my name. It's been saying my name for 20 minutes. She looked at the window, curtained, now closed tight. "Is someone out there?" "Don't go to the window." She looked at me the way she'd looked at me when we were children, and I'd told her something she didn't believe. But she didn't go to the window. We gathered. Not formally. No one said, "Let's all get together." But bodies migrated toward the center of the house, toward the common room, away from the walls. 26 people, now 34, with the additional arrivals, packed into one room, some standing, some sitting on the floor, children in laps. The murmur from outside was audible to everyone. No one was pretending now. No one was offering rational explanations. My mother found me. She took my hand. She hasn't held my hand since I was a child. She held it and said nothing, and her hand was warm and dry and real, and she was here, inside, and her voice was also out there, beyond the tree line, speaking in the dark. The murmur changed at 12:40. It had been general, overlapping voices, the sound of a group. Now individual voices began separating from it, coming forward, getting clearer, as if the sources were moving from the tree line toward the house, not rapidly, not rushing, a slow approach, voice by voice, each one becoming distinct as it neared. Probir's voice close to the right side wall. Come outside, it's warm now. Meishi's voice closer. Where are you all? Why are you hiding? My mother's voice close to the front door. Open the door, I'm outside. Open the door. My mother's hand tightened on mine. She was sitting next to me. She heard her own voice asking to be let in. Her face did something I'd never seen. A collapse of certainty, a fundamental disturbance at the level of identity. To hear yourself where you are not, to hear yourself asking yourself for entry. The voices were at the walls now, all around the house, not just from the tree line, from all sides, circling. Each one a family member's voice, each one saying things that were casual, normal, reasonable. Let me in, I'm cold. Why is the door locked? Hello? Is someone there? Where did everyone go? And layered beneath them, my own voice saying, it's fine, there's nothing out there. I checked, it's fine. Open the door. I had never said those words. They were not a recording. They were not a playback. They were something generated in my voice, something constructed. And they were saying the exact thing that would be needed to make someone inside open the door. No one opened the door. No one moved. 34 people sat in the common room and listened to themselves ask to be let in, and no one moved. Children were crying openly now. My grandmother's prayer was audible, continuous, whispered, directed at something she trusted more than anything in this room. Ria had her face pressed into Tarun's shoulder. Sorav was standing near the center of the room, with his fists clenched, breathing through his nose, looking at the ceiling. At 1:15, the voices began saying things that hadn't happened. My mother's voice outside the wall near my head. Remember when you were small and you got lost at the Mela? I found you by the sweet shop. You were crying. I carried you home. This happened. This is a real memory. I was 5. I haven't thought about it in 20 years. I've never told anyone about it. My mother was next to me, holding my hand, and her voice was on the other side of the wall, reciting a shared memory as if to prove it was really her, as if identity could be established through archived intimacy. Probir, by the far wall, made a sound. I looked at him. He was pressing his palms over his ears. I understood his own voice outside was telling him something private, something known only to him, something that proved it was him, or proved it had access to the things that made him him. It was doing this to everyone, individualized, personalized, each voice finding its person inside the house and delivering private knowledge through the wall, not threats. not demands, proof of identity, as if the thing outside needed us to believe it was us in order for us to open the door. At 1:45, Piku went to the front door. I didn't see him move until he was already there. He was 19. He was hearing something. His face was slack, soft, the face of someone listening to something beautiful. He reached for the door handle. Surav tackled him, not gently. Full body, the way you tackle someone walking into traffic. Piku went down hard, hit his head on the floor, started crying. Not from the pain, from something else. "She's out there," he kept saying. "She's calling me. She needs me." I don't know whose voice he was hearing. I don't know what it was saying to him. He fought Sorav, genuinely fought, twisting and kicking, until Probir and Jeet held him down, and he eventually went still, and then he just cried quietly for a long time. After that, Probir and Tarun pushed a heavy cabinet in front of the main door. Surav checked every window. We moved the children to the center of the room, surrounded by adults. The voices continued outside, patient, various, intimate. At 3:10, they stopped. Like the night before, not faded, not retreated. Stopped mid-word, mid-breath, as if a switch had been thrown. The silence afterward was so absolute that my ears rang. We sat in it. No one spoke. No one moved for maybe 10 minutes, as if the silence might be a trick, as if making noise might restart it. Then a bird sang outside. A single bird, tentative, testing the pre-dawn air. Then another. The ordinary world reasserting itself in small increments. People began to breathe normally. Someone started crying, one of the aunts, quiet, exhausted weeping. The children had fallen asleep in the silence, the way children do when crisis exceeds their capacity. My mother released my hand. I looked at my palm, red marks where her nails had pressed. No one slept. We sat in the common room until full dawn, until the light came through the curtains and the world outside was visible and ordinary. Then Probir opened the front door, pushing the cabinet aside with Tarun's help, and stepped onto the porch. The clearing was empty. The tree line was just trees, pines moving slightly in a morning breeze. Birds going about their business. No marks in the gravel. No footprints in the grass. The band of bare earth at the tree line was undisturbed. Probir walked slowly, deliberately, to the edge of the grass. He looked into the trees. He stood there for a long time. Then he came back and said, "We're leaving today." It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a discussion. By 8 a.m., every car was being loaded. Bags half packed. Things forgotten. It didn't matter. Ria was crying. Not from fear now, but from anger. From the injustice of her wedding night being stolen. From the 2 remaining days of celebration being canceled. Tarun held her and said nothing, and his face suggested he was not going to argue with Probir about this. I helped carry bags. I moved quickly. I wanted to be in a car and on the road and away from here. But as I loaded the last bag into Sorav's Scorpio, I looked at the tree line one more time, the bare earth margin. I walked toward it, not all the way, stopping at maybe 5 meters. I looked down at it. There were marks, not footprints, not human footprints, more like impressions, as if something heavy had rested there. circular depressions in the hard, packed earth, each maybe the size of a dinner plate, arrayed in a rough semicircle facing the house. 7 of them, 7 points where something had pressed down, regularly spaced, as if positioned, as if arranged. 7. I counted the voices I'd been able to distinguish the night before. 7 distinct voices. My mother, Mashi, Probir, Ria, Sorav, Arnab, mine. I got in the car. We drove in convoy down the gravel road. I looked back once. The house was receding behind us, getting smaller, and the tree line extended on either side of it, running north and south as far as I could see. That straight line, that decision. In the car, no one spoke for the first 20 minutes. Then Sorav said, without looking away from the road, the voices knew things. My voice was telling me about the time I stole money from my mother's purse when I was 13. No one knows about that. No one. I didn't respond. I didn't have a response. Because my voice had told me about the Matella, a memory shared between me and my mother. But what it said next, before the voices stopped, what it said in the last minutes, that was something only I knew, something I'd never told anyone, something that happened in the dark of my room when I was 17 and thought I was entirely alone, and it said it casually, the way you mention something to a friend, as if it already knew me from inside. We drove. The mountain road curved and descended. The tree line disappeared behind a ridge. The pine smell faded. The air warmed. By afternoon, we were in the plains, and the Darjeeling property was just a location on a map. A place we'd been, a place we'd left. That should be the end. I want it to be the end. 3 weeks later, I was back in my apartment in Kolkata. Overnight dispatch, the logistics system, the routine I'd built to replace the emptiness with structure. Normal returned. I hadn't spoken about it with anyone, not my mother, not Surav. We'd silently agreed, the way families do, that it hadn't happened, that the wedding was lovely, that we'd left early because of weather. 3 weeks later, 2:50 a.m., I was at my desk, doing scheduling for the morning routes. My apartment is on the 4th floor of a building in Salt Lake. Urban, concrete, no trees for blocks. The nearest forest is 30 kilometers away. I heard the murmur, faint not from outside, from the walls, from the space between my apartment and the next one. The sound of overlapping voices, familiar voices, family voices, in conversation, low, comfortable. The sound of people gathered together. I put my headphones on. I turned up the volume. I drowned it. It stopped after 20 minutes. It didn't come back that night, but it came back 3 nights later, and 4 nights after that. And now it comes every week, sometimes twice, always between 2 and 4 a.m. Always the murmur, always the family, always the comfortable, ordinary sound of people I love talking to each other in a room I can't locate. It hasn't gotten louder. It hasn't developed individual voices again. It hasn't spoken my name or asked to be let in. It stays at the level of murmur, the gathered family sound, the background noise of belonging, the sound the house made before everything went wrong. I haven't told anyone. I haven't told my mother. She called last week and said she's sleeping well and the wedding was lovely. And when am I visiting next? She sounded normal. She sounded like herself. But I've started wondering, what if the thing in the trees wasn't trying to get in? What if it was already in? What if the voices outside the house weren't approaching from the tree line, but leaving from inside us, projected outward, given back, reflected? What if it already had what it needed the first night it spoke my name, and everything after was just it learning how much we'd tolerate before running? We ran, and it didn't chase us. It didn't need to chase us, because the murmur, this murmur, the one I hear in my walls at 3 a.m., it doesn't sound hungry. It doesn't sound predatory. It sounds like a family gathering that's happening without me in a room I've never been able to find, and the door has been open this whole time. And the only thing on the other side is something that already knows everything about me, because it has been me somewhere for longer than I've been listening. I sleep with headphones now. I work my shifts. I call my mother on Sundays. I do not talk about it. None of us do. But last Sunday, my mother said something at the end of our call. She said, "I've been sleeping so well lately. I feel like I'm not alone anymore." She said it happily. She said it like it was good news. I said, "That's good, Ma." I hung up. The murmur came early that night, 1:15. Earlier than it's ever come. And for the first time, I heard my mother's voice separate from it, not speaking to me, speaking to them, to the rest of the murmur, comfortable, familiar, at home. I put my headphones on. I don't know how many nights I have left where the headphones work. I don't know what happens when the murmur stops being background and becomes foreground. I don't know what it means that my mother sounds happy. I know that I'm awake and it's 3 a.m. and my apartment is concrete and urban and there are no trees for 30 kilometers. And it doesn't matter. It hasn't mattered since the first night it said my name, because the tree line was never the source. The tree line was just where it was loud enough for us to notice. It's quieter here, almost inaudible, almost easy to ignore, almost